Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya al-mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, I've explained to you how this degeneration of the human psyche in the 20th and 21st century, which actually is a degeneration of human civilization actually, because we forget the ancient knowledge of our spiritual insight, our heart base, our capacity to understand the grandeur of this universe, the grandeur of God, the Creator, and so on. So when we divorce ourselves, we have this problem because we are living in an atheistic worldview. So we are dependent on the nafsul ammara bisu and nafsul hawaniyah, which I've explained in detail how actually fraud, psychosexual theory is just based on this hawaniyah, shahwaniyah, Amara type of psychology. So if that is the case, this aesthetic worldview is just the physical world only, the P only. We are talking about the jasad. So they are talking about the jasad only. And this jasad, you're not talking about your qalb, right? Your akal or your roh. So this has resulted in the emphasis on only the physical realm and the denial of the spiritual realm. So when we have that, then you have this fragmentation. You have a fragmented, okay, human psyche. So you cannot do anything about it, because so long as you deny the major component of your subconscious, because even Freud says there is the subconscious component of our existence, which is far more than the conscious component. But he does not define what is a subconscious. If you say the subconscious is only residing only in your brain and nothing more than that, in only the physical realm, then this denial result in a fragmented human psyche, and this fragmented human psyche will lead to our own problems that we have, this explosion of the psychosocial problems that we see today in terms of anxiety, depression, suicide, addiction, and the whole range of problems that you never see in traditional society. So we have this so-called advanced Western society, so-called Western because the 20th and 21st century is a Western century of the West, all right? Right on from the 18th century onward, when they begin colonizing the world, where they split the world into the various domains of the Western powers, whether it is the Dutch, the English, the German, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and so on. So you can see that this worldview has created this fragmented humanity today. So this fragmented humanity, majority of it is just living in the nafsul ammara bisu and nafsul haywaniyah, shahwaniyah only, within this realm. So if they are not going to transcend this, then we have a problem, because they are living in the physical realm. So this is the jasad. So this is the end all and be all. But if you don't move towards the spiritual realm of acknowledging our qalb, our heart, our roh, and our akal, these three components, that is the subconscious aspect of existence. Our existence in the realm which Allah has created for us, and which exists in this earth temporary and will exist forever and ever and ever and ever, because we are created with that capacity. So if to deny the spiritual realm will then result us in having a fragmented humanity, and whatever psychotherapy that we use will always fail. It cannot succeed. But today we have some of the therapies that is being developed in the West, because realizing this horror of the explosion of psychological problems and psychological social problems that is now invading the whole society in the West, mass killing, prostitution, drug addiction, madness, all kind of madness. If you go to DSM-5, you see all kind of classification of madness. It wonders, are they just only biological? They're only physical? Is it not that there is more to it than just this biological aspect? So we have to then frame a better frame. And there are works within the Western world. They're talking about now about, say, positive psychology. So if we take a few of these things, like positive psychology, from behavioral psychology, they moved on to humanistic. Now they have this positive psychology, and now they have positive transcendent psychology. They are talking about spiritual psychology, now it's getting ground. And there are various therapies that are also moving upward. For example, if we take CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. Cognitive behavior therapy is here, all right? They are talking about I explained to you the cognitive dissonance of what you believe and what you do. This is your belief, this is what you do. There is a divergence, so there is a cognitive dissonance. Dissonance, eh? This cognitive dissonance has to be pulled together. So in CBT talks about pulling this thing together so that you are more congruent in terms of your belief and your action. All right? So when you do that, the CBT idea of thoughts, of behavior, I'll explain to you in the next video, but they have acknowledged that actually at the Nafsul Lawama is what? The self-reproaching self, the self who is now thinking, the thinking self, or the self that is trying to reduce the dissonance. So this aspect is the aspect of the akal. So if we go about CBT then stand around this aspect of akal. So now they have moved from this jasad-based psychological philosophy to a akal-based or mind-based, mental-based. So you have cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. So this model is now well researched, because when they work together in terms of the action, behavior and thoughts and how these are linked together, there are so many thousands of research which shows that it works. Well, it works, they say, maybe in 80% of the case. What about the other 20%? So where does it lies? So again, there are more movement towards direction of Islamic psychology, because we have, apart from CBT, we have DBT. Now we have DBT. Okay. CBT is developed by our Aaron Beck, and he talked about the concept of inner speech. All right. When you talk about the concept of inner speech, you are already transcending from the physical realm to the spiritual realm, but he does not define the inner speech. So DBT goes one step further. DBT is developed by Marsha Linehan. So Marsha says that we have within this dialectical behavior therapy, to do that we must access our heart. All right. So she says that we access our heart. All right. So now you're talking about mindfulness. All right. So they're talking about, and DBT takes a lot of Buddhist philosophy. So you can see they are going back to the tradition, ancient tradition, because this ancient tradition is not only an Islamic tradition. Before Islam, there was the Buddhist tradition, they have the Hindu tradition, they have the Confucian tradition, and so on. So there are many traditions before Islam that brings to the same idea that we are a spiritual being living temporary in a physical world. And this is repeated over and over in the philosophy of Buddhism or in the philosophy of Hinduism, and more so in the idea that of the revealed knowledge of Islam. So DBT now talks about this. So they're actually moving upward from here, from this type of therapy, they are moving to here, but they cannot reach here. Why? Again, DBT stills and CBT stills based on secularism. They acknowledge there is this realm of the unseen. All right, DBT acknowledge that, CBT does not acknowledge that. So we have this whole idea of the dichotomy, because they are still having this atheistic worldview. So they have not been able to decouple themselves from this atheistic worldview. But DBT is coming closer, all right, towards what we call a spiritual realization or inner realization or mindfulness. They call it mindfulness, because they don't want to use, they are very, very careful not to use religious terminology. Why? Because even though it is based on Buddhism, they say, well, you know, this is our worldview and it is nothing to do with Buddhists, all right, being a Buddhist and so on. So they have defined that, which well and good, but it shows that this 21st century is a century of confusion, especially in psychology as a science, because psychology is the study of the self, ilmun nafs, the self. So what does the self consist of? It's just the physical. If that is so, then we are creating more and more fragmentation in human psyche, and more problems and more challenges. And you wouldn't be surprised that the collapse of this civilization is the madness of the psyche of human beings. Greed, depression, anxiety, gross hedonistic lifestyle, just do anything and everything. In the end, the whole base of society cannot take it anymore. Okay? And you can see this prevalent in, especially now, those societies that have embraced this kind of lifestyle, they are facing a lot of problems, even at the level of children. So we Muslims also will face the same problem because we are part of this world and the media is controlled by them and the whole worldview is controlled by them. So we have to create an alternative worldview. So I'm talking to you about CBT, we have DBT. So where does Islam stays? Because we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We can absorb from CBT, DBT a lot of the ideas because, as I say, there are so many research being done in CBT. There are so many thousands of papers published by various people in the universities, and you can go to psychologytools.org. They publish most of this material up. You can upload it for free because it is being shared based on CBT. All the research in CBT, the kind of efficacy is being used for whether it is anxiety, depression, phobias, borderline personality disorder, and whatever, you name it. Okay? So they have a lot of resources. So where do we stand now? In Islam, inshallah, Islamic psychology, that I'm trying to do this website, islamicspsychology.net, and we upload into YouTube, Islamic psychology. We are going to fuse this up. We call it Pi CBT. So what we do is we create this Pi CBT because here we are talking about moving, not only living in the Nafsul Lawama, which is good, which is not bad, but we can go towards the highest level of Al-Mutmainnah. This is where the whole worldview of Islam is based on love of Allah, all right, and it is based on, all right, completing our life and the coherence between our SEMP. So at this level, we have love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah loves for us, and we have the coherence of our spiritual self, our emotional self, our mental self, and our physical self. So this physical self is just one small component. This is the atheistic worldview. This is the Pi CBT worldview. So the worldview of how we can create a society of love, and this love of Pi CBT again will differ from CBT, DBT, because we have a mechanism within Islam that is heart-based. This is mentioned by Imam Ghazali about how the spiritual self, this cult that you're talking about, is not just the physical cult, but linked to our physical cult is the insight, the spiritual cult that is linked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that receives and transfer information. And how this information are being expressed, we have described it in our book. Right? I'll repeat again, inshallah. I'll photostat that part of it and display to you, and then maybe you can understand our theoretical framework for positive. P is P, I is Islamic cognitive behavior therapy. So we take from here, all right? So what we do is, though we don't reinvent the wheel, but because our worldview, our research by our great scholars of the past are so intense, so immense, actually all these things here are already mentioned, but they mention it in the traditional format, because Al-Imam Ghazali did not live in the 21st century. So he explained it from the traditional societal of those days and of those years. So we can actually harvest those ideas, and you can find that it supersedes CBT, because you talk about Aaron Beck. Aaron Beck said, oh, he's the discoverer of automatic thoughts. Automatic thoughts has been discovered by Ibn al-Qayyim. Ibn al-Qayyim reported about this inner speech or automatic thoughts 1,000 years ago. Imam Ghazali talked about how to transform ourselves using this inner speech. So this is not new, but because the West has conquered the whole worldview of this world today, we are talking about the research base that CBT has done. It is wonderful, all right? So there's so much research that if you open the various Google, you can find so many courses and so many research material that we are not going to repeat. So I'm going to develop this by CBT as the way forward for Muslims to develop our psychology. Islamic psychology will be based on positive Islamic cognitive behavior therapy, and if we can do that, then we can remove this, not only the cognitive dissonance, because at this level we are talking about the removal of the spiritual dissonance. Because at this level, the level of the raw, you're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, about this dissonance of the spiritual self. The spiritual self is now, there's a big gap. So we want to bring this together, so we have our spiritual, emotional and mental self is one unified self. This unified personality, this love-based personality, this beautiful personality, this beautiful worldview that Allah has ordained upon us, and it is up to us, we Muslims, to really rediscover our roots. This is our roots. This is our deen. This is the revelation that was sent to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was carried through by his family, his companions, the tabi'in, the great scholars. They are carrying this through. But because we were colonized by the West over the last 300-400 years, we lost all sense of direction, and even we lost our sense of our own inner confidence of being an ummah that can carry this new civilization, the 21st century civilization, to the greatest ever civilization that humanity has ever seen. But we must start with ourselves. When we talk about this, we must be confident enough to know that we are not a physical being only, and we are not a fragmented human being, but we are a coherent human being. We are coherent in terms of our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical self, and we enjoy the joy of fulfillment, achievement, success, forgiveness, love, appreciation, you name it, all the wonderful qualities that Allah has ordained upon us to spread to the world. And this positive message, inshallah, will reach to every corner of the world with the will and the grace and the mercy and the love of Allah. So what we do is every day we do our best, strive to understand this worldview. And those of you who wants to use this material, do more research. I'm giving you some ideas which, as I read Imam Ghazali's book, I see this whole picture. And I'm giving you in picture form so that you can understand, and then inshallah you can write your thesis or your studies or your research or your whatever that you want to do with it. Inshallah we spread this knowledge, and inshallah Allah will give us the best of this world and the best of hereafter, inshallah.